Welcome to Storefront Science, the show where we decode the chaos of modern store operations.
We're bypassing the buzzwords to have honest conversations with the practitioners and executives who are actually shaping the industry. We're live on the floor at NRF. I'm Ryan Whitfield.
And I'm Ben Hinshaw.
Today we're joined by Matt Lovitt, our second guest here. So I want to start off first by Matt, just kind of talking about your background and how you got here. So I want to give you a chance to kind of talk about your career.
Sure. So my background is in retail. I've been in retail for the last 15 years now, so showing my age a little bit. Started on the shop floor with a UK retailer called Sainsbury's, so various management positions within store. My journey into workforce management started with that business, so I was really fortunate to be part of their labour transformation programme, which saw them bring a new WFM or a new scheduling system to around 150,000 employees. And that for me was really where my journey in labour started. On leaving that business, I went and joined the team at Reflexis, which are now part of the Zebra team. Again, great transition from a WFM perspective, execution into the portfolio of things that we looked at from a frontline retailer's perspective. Spent 3 years there basically across consulting, working with some of the world's biggest global retailers, some delivery. So actually tried to cut my teeth in both understanding the problems that retailers are looking for from a consulting standpoint and actually delivering the product as well. Before making the move to Lodgile, where I spent the last 5 years of my career within pre-sales and leading the commercial functions within EMEA. Before more recently, 4 months ago, co-founding Frontline XP.
Yeah. So before we get into more specific industry questions, what led you to start Frontline Expedition? Are you guys trying to solve? Why now?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, and I want to be really careful, this isn't a statement of my view of Lodgile per se. I've worked with a number of vendors, and I think we have a number of partners across various ecosystems. I think for me, in my last role as a commercial director, the thing that I felt was lacking within industry was, I think, a safe space for a retailer to find non-biased advice around not just independent solutions for a moment in time, but actually to start to think about the colleague journey more holistically, rather than looking at a specific pain point. And Lodgile is an incredibly broad platform, so I was really lucky to look at a number of scenarios within a retail environment. I didn't feel like there was anyone that was really operations side, advising clients around, how does this piece of technology fit a broader frontline ecosystem once you've purchased this? How does the value from a frontline perspective integrate with the 4 or 5 dependent systems that kind of tie into that environment? And both Rob and myself felt like there was kind of a big piece of white space where retailers didn't want predefined outcomes where, for example, a consulting business would kind of lead the narrative or an outcome with a certain solution in mind. We work with retailers, and sometimes the advice is actually don't buy anything. It's a changing process, whatever it may be. But I think having that creative freedom to work on the retailer side, and I think add meaningful value and outcome, is really what attracted us to starting the business.
So in that role, when you guys are working with different retailers, you find ones that are struggling. Are there any common friction points you're finding right now? You mentioned, sometimes you're advising not to use technology at all. They're not at that spot yet, but are there any other common friction spots you're finding?
Yeah, I mean, and some of these aren't surprising. These have been friction points that have existed for well over a decade now. I think the biggest piece that we see is readiness for technological change and adoption. And that spans everything from actually the end user right through to, is a business well set up and structured to implement a complex piece of technology? Does that manifest itself? Obvious things like data, right? So over the course of the last 10 years, a number of retailers have been on a journey of trying to consolidate. They bought numerous different systems at a real pace, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of organizations see is that they see value in areas like workforce management, they see value in things like HR and people transformation change, they see value in frontline ecosystem tools. Is that not a lot of these systems have like common data sets in order to get the best value out of them. Data is an absolute prerequisite. And I think when you walk the show here, a large amount of this year's conversation is around things like agentic AI, right? So if you're a retailer at the moment and you've not even got a great grasp of your own data sets, you're a million miles away from building your own agents, right? So I think there are some commonalities that like we see. I think the other area that I think is a common struggle is the way that retailers are set up. Sometimes there's a friction point between retailers that want to be a technology company and retailers that want to kind of serve customers, right? And I don't mean that in the sense that there are retailers out there that are kind of masquerading as tech development shops, but I think one of the things that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No,
Can you edit that out? Where's it going? That.
between the balance between retailers going as technology companies
yeah,
versus serving their customers.
Yeah. So I think the challenge that we see, having a common strategy for not just frontline, but also I think broader tech infrastructure. So what you typically see within a retailer is you'll have an ops function, an IT function, an HR change function, all these common functions that have independent agendas. And it's rare that you see a retailer that will come to the table that has a common view of experience to be like within their organization. And I think what that tends to lead to is a lot of businesses that buy technology in isolation of each other. And that throws up challenges everywhere, right? So we see it all the time. It'll be an ops team that have gone out and bought a WFM system that haven't brought HR on the journey, or there's an IT team here that have got a vision around build and buy that isn't aligned up with the rest of the strategy that the people team want to see from a frontline perspective. So I think there are a couple of areas, like I say, data being one of them that throws itself up every single time. And then I think having the basics of oversight or a strategy as a retail business is, like I say, a real challenge.
Having that unified goal of everybody on the same plan, same goal of being customer first, and you might appear as a technology, but the goal should just be on the customer.
Correct. And I mean, without naming specific names, there are retailers that we work with that, because of that friction or that lack of cohesive view, do appear like a technology company, because you walk around the store with a frontline colleague and they'll have 62 apps to do their job. It's crazy. I mean, it might be something that as an individual outside of work is quite comfortable, but when you think about productivity, experience, how that manifests itself from a customer standpoint, that's the challenge, right? And that situations like this happen when you have individuals that are out there buying tech or kind of sharing an independent
Sense with high turnover, how are you supposed to train a new person on these tools? Take 2 weeks and they might be gone.
Yeah, and what we often see is questions that throw themselves up on the front line in kind of pilots and POCs, where colleagues will provide feedback that say, I quite like this piece of technology, but how does it? And I'll give you a really great example, guys, like the task and execution management systems that you see out there on the market. There are subtle differences between all of them, but from a colleague's perspective, the kind of questions you see straight away are, this is great, but how does it fit in with the kind of 2 or 3 other apps or kind of processes that you've built out as a business that are incredibly similar to this? That's where it manifests itself. And we see this time and time again.
Yep, that makes sense. So we want to get in the next part, which is we just announced the partnership with us. Of course, you worked at Logile. You're not going to stop working with Logile now that you have your own place. But where do you see that connection, that combination making the most impact in 2026? Right? Where do you see that being?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, when I look at this particular partnership, and it's back to some of the points we were talking about a moment ago, I think Logile brings to the market a world-class kind of industry-leading platform for everything across store operations. The challenge for a retailer when you look at kind of an outcome is that it sometimes can be quite difficult to understand what aspects in the ecosystem or platform come first. What do I need to do to kind of be ready to adopt the change and get the most out of a platform like Logile? And I think this is the beauty of our partnership, is that through Frontline, sit alongside you guys, or sit alongside a retailer and effectively take that step back and ensure that as they're investing in platforms like yourself, that they're set up for success, that they are in a position with them to fix that specific problem, but they've got a vision for what the next 18 months, 3 years look like. Because I think, again, without harping on about some of the challenges that we see, but where technology is bought for a moment in time or a point solution, that's when we see churn in kind of 12 to 18 months time. Long-term value, did that kind of just scratch a particular itch? What can we do with this piece of technology? How can we continue to get value out of it? I think that's our role as Frontline within this partnership, is to make sure that a retailer understands that they have a roadmap, and that they are set up for success.
With retailers and the technology company together, and they both need to have a roadmap. They both need to be going places.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if we look at a couple of specific examples, like data planning as a concept, right, is often something that it appears to a retailer to be fundamentally detached from something that a frontline colleague would ever see.
Yeah.
But yet is intrinsic to every aspect of a store colleague's life, right? And I think Rob and I, using that as a basis on the retail as a strategic partners, because wherever we would go from a retailer's perspective, and it matters more now in 2026 than ever, is we will always start with process, people management. How do you build up a concept of demand? How do you understand where your people are on the shop floor doing what at what time? That's where we start. Effectively, say from our perspective, some of those projects from the retailers that we see pick up these, we see them as fundamentally different constructs, right? And it's Rob and I's job to go into those organizations and ensure that they have an understanding of kind of where foundationally they start, how this evolves, and what it means to a frontline colleague.
Makes sense.
All right. So kind of tying it all together, because I think we've touched on all the different parts here, the associate experience. So we talked about 60 plus apps to do someone's job, the friction that causes, the swivel chair, the time, all that. But is the solve for a better frontline worker experience in retail right now?
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify this, because I think it would be very easy for someone like myself to sit in there and kind of sum it up in one sentence. And this is what I'm about to articulate is complex for a retailer to do. I think a large amount of retailers would benefit from structurally taking a step back, asking themselves one simple question, which is if Rob or I or someone from Logile walked into a room and asked simply, describe experience or what you want your frontline experience to be like for someone that works in an organization. Typically, a lot of retailers can't do that, which may seem surprising, but I think effectively, because technology is being bought at such a pace over the last decade, and we've had such like kind of milestone changes in retail operations through periods of time like COVID, for example, I think I would describe, or we see them as almost like hamsters on a wheel, right? And I think particularly with the advent of AI, and it's probably a subject for a different day, I think a lot of organizations would value from just taking a step back, putting that question up on a whiteboard, and as a leadership team, really seeing if there's a unified view across the room, because I'm fairly confident based on the conversations that we have, if you were to ask that of a CEO, a COO, a CHRO, whoever it is within your organization, you'll probably get 5 different answers for what they expect a colleague's journey to be like within their organization. And I think if you don't get that right, we go back to some of what we were talking about earlier, which is you will continue to find yourself with colleagues that are frustrated or can't understand the justification behind the technology that you're putting in your hands. We need to try and move retailers away from that notion that kind of investing in technology, providing an alternative, just that we see most commonly.
You need to have the ops and the process of the plan backing up the tools and stuff you provide the employees.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's part of what really dialing into something that we were passionate about as a point of difference within Frontline's team is really well served from a consulting and technology perspective. We don't feel like the voice that they should have within the process really manifests itself in the colleague experience. And you see that time and time again. And that's not an easy solve, because what I'm talking about here is really, as an organization, being honest with yourself and looking at the way you're structured and set up and going, who needs to have a bigger voice in the room? Where does some of the ownership for these type of decisions sit within an organization? These are big structural changes that we're talking about here. But for me, the flaw here at NRF is that the pace at which technology is moving at the moment, the things that you can do, if you don't do some of what we just talked about here, which is have a unified vision across your organization, you will end up automating more per process than you will actually make a difference for a colleague on the front line.
And it needs to be make impact for those at the front line. Sometimes people just get disconnected. There's nobody at the CEO table that had spent there's enough time in stores. They need that voice. They need to be listening to that voice.
100%. I think if you were to walk a shop floor with a frontline retail colleague and talk to them about the value, not to be disrespectful or patronizing, but that's probably not what they're coming into work thinking about, right? They don't need 15 reports automated or truncated in a different way, just quicker. That's not what they need. They need support with kind of managing or consolidating the hundreds of thousands of data points that they deal with every day and guiding them towards the next best outcome for the customer or for the operation. And that's really, like I say, that's what I see as kind of the difference between the retailers that will win and the retailers that will lag behind. Because where I've sat in talks and been blown away, have the data governance in place, have a foundational understanding of what they want their customer and colleague experience to look like, and are now out there leveraging the power of AI to be able to kind of move at pace and really change both colleague and customer experience. I think it will, the chasm between those that can and can't, or for whatever reason, or whether that's the right analogy, will only go bigger over the next couple of years.
There's plenty of analogies. Faster alone, I think that what people can do. Siloed teams can make technology great, but it will be flexible is the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rob and I have had great fun walking around some of the stands here and just kind of role playing for those examples with tech vendors where it's like, right, great, I sit in labor and Rob sits in food safety or commercial or production planning. And effectively a lot of technology partners we see at the moment interchangeably, they're not actually direct partners at Frontline. I'm not saying Logile are doing this, but there's a willingness to kind of reinforce some of those challenges. And I don't think technology companies need to do it, but yeah, we'll build an agent for that and we'll solve a problem for you in this space. No, kind of stop doing that. That doesn't help. It's kind of counterintuitive.
The closing question we like to ask everybody is a two-parter. And I'm going to give you an example from my past, my history, just to kind of give you an idea of how granular you can go or how big you can go. So my dad worked at Domino's for 33 years. And if you asked him what kept him up at night, it wasn't corporate strategy. It wasn't anything like that. It was the price of cheese. So just kind of give you an example of how small you can go here. So from either your own experience or what you think the retailers are experiencing, what do you think is the biggest thing keeping them up? And the other one is if you had a magic wand and you could solve any problem with that magic wand.
I think I'm going to be a little bit high level here because there are things that I think if you were to ask me in my former capacity within retail, like obviously food safety, those kind of things, they're the bare basics that keep you up at night. And I guess that's not what you're looking for from a frontline opinion. I think the thing that worries me most at the moment, again, is partly reinforced by what we were just talking about here. And I use myself as someone that is not building agents in my spare time, right? I'm someone that I think is kind of that mid-mark, trusting of people to help guide or shape my experience while I learn. I think what keeps me up at night, or I think the thing that worries me when I look at retail at the moment, is where you haven't got the basics of what we've been talking about in this podcast in place, that we are going to accelerate or retailers will find themselves in a real run whereby AI is the subject matter that becomes kind of like a crushing pressure for them. They race to invest in technology that further fractures the relationship between colleagues on the front line and central teams. I think there are a ton of things with AI that not even the technology partners on the shop floor here at NRF can answer. Ethics, everything that goes behind it. Do we really want a frontline experience of the next generation where I'm coming into work and I spend my time kind of prompting a co-pilot to ask me how to do a job? I'm not sure that's the vision that we need to be racing towards. So I think it is quite a high level or a macro subject, but I think whilst it has tremendous potential and the value of it could be unlimited at a stretch, my worry is that there aren't many people or sharing their expertise of what does an ethical journey towards productivity look like. I think it's a real challenge and something that I don't have an answer for. There's some very bright people here at NRF this week, and I'm not sure they've got the answers for it either yet. So magic wand, how would you fix it? Or how would I fix some of the challenges that I see at the moment? You know what I'd love to see? And if I had a magic wand, I don't even know if it answers the magic wand piece of this, but what I would love to see is people going back to basics when it comes to the whole kind of interaction between HQ and central frontline strategy. And and actually spending some time out on the shop floor with people, managing, doing the do, I think I'm really surprised, and there's a fundamental difference. And we were out at Walmart Saturday, and I think the culture and the values that that business started out with are ones that, irrespective of the pace of technological change, still hold true for me today, which is, if you spend enough time out speaking, engaging with your customers, the people that work on your shop floor, the answers will kind of present themselves really quickly to the problems that you're probably scratching your head at to kind of find for within your business. So I think the magic one piece for me is probably a really simple piece of the thing that I would love to see more people do. I'm sorry to keep coming back to AI, but if you're struggling to find use cases for AI within your business, the best place you're going to find them is out on the shop floor. There are countless ones. And if Rob was in the room, he would talk about this now. He tears his hair out when it comes to actually businesses asking him what AI can do for him. He will go out there and will look at a bakery and go, that's a great use case where AI can add value. And I think from a magic one point of view, a lot of retailers could do well to just go back out there and spend some time. As much as it is a complex environment, and I will probably get slaughtered for saying this, retail really, I think, could operate as effectively if it was just stripped back and simplified. Yeah, correct. And I think the best retailers do a really good job.
I mean, that makes sense. To pull up again from my experience, my neighbor, I say hot and round. Just get the pizza hot and round, and that's it. That's all we need to do. And I think that sometimes people lose sight of that kind of thing. Of just like, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things.
Absolutely. I mean, people ask all the time, address turnover challenges in our business. How do we make sure that generation we're retaining the best talent, frontline from your perspective? I think, again, it's a really great thing that I've seen over the last 4 or 5 months. People normally defer to young people like technology, so we'll give them more of that. And to your point around keeping things simple, with dad's experience, for me, some of these really fundamental challenges are solved by looking after your people, making them feel valued and productive when they come into work. And again, it sounds really simple for me to say that, but when you look at a large amount of organizations, I think they're looking for a silver bullet and something that genuinely doesn't exist. I mean, that's why I come back to what I said at the start is if someone presents a challenge of turnover, Rob and I will always start with, yeah, show us your WFM, show us where that person's placed within the working week. And it's no great surprise that you've got a load of people that, because they can't pick up extra work, they can't advance within their career, they're always scheduled in with sociable hours. Like, it's not hard. It's just, again, going back to helping retailers, I think, take one step back and go back to some of those basics of what does it take to be a good retailer and good stores.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, I think general, to sum it up, like, innovating for innovation's sake is not the answer. Solving for real problems on the storefront is what. At this point, just want to throw it to you for a second. Do you have anything you want to plug in terms of Frontline XP, LinkedIn, website, anything you guys got in the works right now? This is your moment to put it out there.
Honestly, and I'm woefully underprepared as a former salesman for that question. You genuinely know, I think the people that have seen a lot talking about things that matter to us, I think from a services standpoint, I come back to Taylor sees we don't have a specific service that we'd look to provide. We see, or we can adapt to kind of questions and queries across the front line. So I think if a retailer is out there, they're looking at this clip and they have a problem statement, or they're thinking about any type of frontline change, and they're a little bit nervous that they're making the right decision, then hopefully they've seen enough of Rob and I on LinkedIn to know that we exist, and that's what we're here to solve for. But genuinely, we're just focused on doing a great job with our partners and the retailers that we're working with now, and hopefully more work will come on the back of that. We won't have to sell ourselves that way.
Makes sense. Well, we'd love to have Rob on for another episode in the future, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you guys.
Thank you everyone for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll link to all of Frontline XP socials and websites.